I still remember the day he sacked me. Just like that. No warning. No thank you. No Olivier. After 20 years of service, 20 years of pain, of hiding tears behind fake smiles, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're no longer needed here." Just like that. And I stood there, shaking, with my heart thumping in my chest, wondering if I was going to faint or scream. I had nothing left. He had taken everything from me. That man, my boss, Mr. Gregory. He started abusing me the very first year I started working for him. I was just a 22-year-old secretary, fresh from college, full of dreams. But he broke me. Year after year, he used me like a rag. I couldn't count how many times he forced himself on me. But I remember the abortions. Every single one. 5 pregnancies every year. 5 times he dragged me to a dirty clinic, made me lie down on that cold table, and told me to keep my mouth shut. 5 abortions every year for 20 years. That's 100 unborn babies I was never allowed to keep. Sometimes I dream of them. Tiny voices calling me, asking me why I didn't protect them. I cry in my sleep. And I cry when I wake up too. Nobody knew. Not even my parents. Not even my younger sister Mary, who always thought I was living a good life working in the city. If only she knew the truth. And then after all that, after stealing my body and crushing my soul, he sacked me. Like trash. He said I was getting too old, too slow. Said my services were no longer required. He even laughed when he handed me that letter. I felt something snap inside me that day. Something deep. Something dark. I knew I had nothing left to lose. That was the moment I decided. This man will not get away with what he did to me. But let me take you back to the beginning. Maybe if you understand how it all started, you'll understand how I got here. How a young, smiling girl with big dreams became a broken, barren woman full of shame and rage. It all began when I got my first job offer. I had just graduated from secretarial school. My parents were so proud of me. Daddy told the whole village, "My daughter is going to the city to work for a big company." I packed my bags with excitement and took a bus to the city. The building was tall and shiny. I felt like I was entering a dream. Mr. Gregory was handsome, rich, and powerful. Everyone in the office respected him or feared him. On my first day, he smiled and told me, "You're going to do very well here, Evelyn." I blushed. I thought he was just being kind. But it wasn't kindness. It was something else. Something evil, hidden under that expensive suit and smooth words. For the first few weeks he was polite, gave me light work, complimented my handwriting, bought me lunch. I didn't see it coming. Until one night, he asked me to stay late to type an important document. I was tired, but I agreed. He said, "You're a good girl, Evelyn. Very loyal." I smiled and said thank you. But before I knew what was happening, he locked the office door, came behind me and whispered, "Don't fight me. You'll lose your job if you scream." That was the first time. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? He was the boss. I was just a junior staff. The next morning, he brought me a box of chocolates like nothing happened. I cried in the bathroom. And it didn't stop there. Every month he'd call me to his office after hours. Sometimes he even came to my house. I changed apartments 3 times. He always found me. He said he owned me. And I believed him. Because every time I got pregnant, he took me to a doctor and made me get rid of the baby. He'd pay the doctor, and then threaten me again. "You open your mouth, you lose your job." Or worse. I was scared. I was alone in the city. I needed the money. I needed to help my parents. I hated myself for being weak. For staying. But I didn't know how to leave. And I told myself lies to survive. Maybe he'll stop. Maybe he'll promote me. Maybe I deserve this. But I didn't. Nobody deserves what I went through. Not for 1 year, not for 20. The worst year was when I turned 30. That year I got pregnant 6 times. I lost count of the injections, the pain, the blood. My womb started to weaken. The doctor warned me, "If you keep doing this, you may never have children." I told him I had no choice. He looked at me with pity. I didn't even know what real love looked like anymore. I stopped dating. What was the point? I couldn't keep a baby. I couldn't tell a man the truth about my life. Who would want a woman like me? My sister Mary used to call and say, "Evelyn, you're doing so well in Lagos. When are you getting married?" And I would laugh and lie, "Soon, sis. I'm just focusing on work for now." I hated those lies. But I hated my truth even more. I tried to escape once. I applied for a new job at a different company. I even got invited for an interview. But the moment Mr. Gregory found out, he called the company and told them not to hire me. He said I was a thief. Said I stole company documents. They canceled the interview. That night, he came to my apartment and slapped me so hard my lip bled. "Try that again and I'll ruin you," he said. I didn't try again. And now, after 2 full decades, after taking everything from me, my body, my babies, my peace, he had the audacity to fire me. The morning he did it, I wore my best dress to work. I had ironed it the night before. I was hopeful that day. I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe the new manager he hired would treat me with respect. But no. Instead, I was called into the office and handed a letter. No reason. No warning. He smiled and said, "You served your purpose." Served. Like I was a tool. I sat outside the building for hours. I didn't know where to go. I had no savings. No home. No family in the city. And then the anger rose. Hot. Sharp. Blinding. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to speak. I had to fight back. For the babies I lost. For the years he stole. For the woman I could have been. And that night I made a decision. I would expose Mr. Gregory, no matter what it took. But I didn't know that the moment I opened my mouth, I would discover something even darker about him. Something that would shake everything I thought I knew. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding like a hammer. My body was shaking not from fear but from rage. My hands were cold but my mind was burning. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't scared of Mr. Gregory. I was done being scared. I sat up, wiped my tears, and began writing everything I remembered. Every date. Every time he forced me. Every clinic I was taken to. Every name I could remember, doctors, nurses, cleaners. I didn't know if I would ever get justice, but I knew I had to speak. Even if it cost me everything. By morning, I had a folder filled with notes and I knew what I had to do. I was going to report him. I walked to the nearest women's rights organization I had found online weeks earlier, but never had the courage to visit. The office was small but warm. I stepped inside, my legs trembling. A kind woman with short curly hair and glasses looked up from her desk. "Good morning. How may we help you?" she asked gently. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My lips quivered. My knees buckled. I began to cry. She rushed to hold me. "It's okay. You're safe here," she said. That was the first time in 20 years anyone told me I was safe. Her name was Miss Clara. She gave me water, sat me down, and listened as I told my story. Everything. The abuse. The abortions. The threats. The sack. She didn't interrupt once. But I saw her eyes widen in horror. I saw her hold her chest. I saw her tears. When I finished, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." For the first time, I believed it. Miss Clara told me they had handled many abuse cases, but mine was different. She said it was one of the worst she had ever heard. "You have proof?" she asked. I handed her my notes. She flipped through the pages with trembling hands. "These names. Some of these doctors are already under investigation," she said. "But if we can get one to talk, Mr. Gregory is finished." We had a plan. I would file a formal complaint. Then the organization would open an investigation with legal backing. But Clara warned me, "He'll come after you. Are you ready?" I paused. I looked at my trembling hands, my tired reflection in the mirror on the wall, the dark circles under my eyes, and I nodded. He already took my future. He won't take my voice. But I wasn't ready for what came next. That evening, while I was heading back to my apartment, I noticed a black car slowly following me. I stopped. The car stopped. I walked again. It followed. My heart jumped. Picked up my pace. So did the car. I began to run. Sped up. I ducked into a nearby market and hid behind a group of women selling tomatoes. I crouched low, my breath sharp and painful in my chest. After a few minutes, the car drove off. I didn't go home that night. I slept on a bench in front of a church. The next morning, I went back to Miss Clara and told her what happened. She sighed. He already knows you're talking. Evelyn, we need protection. We'll call the police. But when the police were contacted, they only smiled weakly. Mr. Gregory? One officer laughed. That man sponsors our annual dinner. He's a good man. My mouth dropped open. I couldn't believe it. Clara looked at me. This is deeper than we thought. Still, we didn't stop. Clara introduced me to a journalist named Daniel. He worked with a fearless online news agency. After hearing my story and seeing my records, he agreed to go undercover and investigate Gregory. We're going to bring him down, he promised, even if it's the last thing I do. Daniel managed to contact one of the doctors I named, Dr. Felix, a short, tired-looking man who used to handle most of my abortions. At first, he denied everything, said he didn't remember me. But when Daniel showed him photos and told him the press was involved, he broke. Yes, he confessed. She was brought to me many times. Her boss paid cash. I didn't ask questions. Clara cried when she heard the recording. This is it. This is the beginning. I felt hope for the first time in years. But then just 2 days later, something happened that froze my blood. Daniel disappeared. He had called me the night before to say he was going to dig deeper. He said something about uncovering files linking Mr. Gregory to a secret group of powerful men in the city. But that morning he didn't show up to work. His phone was switched off. His apartment was broken into. His laptop was gone. Clara was panicking. Evelyn, this is bigger than abuse. He's connected to something dangerous. We need to be careful. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept wondering, what had Daniel found? What truth was so dangerous that someone would go this far to hide it? And that's when I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. One night, after one of my forced abortions, Gregory had taken me to a party. I was weak. I could barely walk. But he made me dress up and smile. The party was filled with men in suits, whispering to each other, drinking wine. I had thought it was just business people. But now, I wasn't so sure. Were those men part of something else? Was Gregory just one of many? I began to remember more. The symbols on the wall. The red candles. The locked doors. The way I was asked to serve drinks to guests. And how some of those guests looked at me like I wasn't even human. Suddenly, it all came back. The night someone took me to a back room and said, "You belong to all of us now." I had buried that memory deep. Too painful. Too shameful. But now I knew I had to face it. I told Clara everything. Her face went pale. Evelyn, you were not just abused. You were trafficked. Those words hit me like thunder. Trafficked? Me? All these years, I thought it was just Gregory. But now it was clear. I had been part of something much darker. Much bigger. And the people behind it? They were powerful. Rich. Untouchable. Suddenly, exposing Gregory wasn't just about my pain. It was about stopping a whole chain of evil that was still happening to other girls. I had to keep going, even if it killed me. That night, I cried like a baby. I clutched my belly, remembering the children I was forced to give up. I whispered to them, "Mama's going to make it right. I promise." But I didn't know that while I was promising justice to my unborn babies, someone else was watching me. The next morning, when I stepped outside my apartment, there was a note pinned to my door. "Keep your mouth shut, or you'll join Daniel." I froze. And right under the note was a small white box. Inside it was a baby's sock. Tiny, pink, stained with something dark. My knees buckled. Someone knew everything. They were coming for me. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at that tiny sock. My fingers trembled as I picked it up from the box. The fabric was soft, but cold. Cold like the wind that blew through my chest that morning. My hands shook. My heart stopped. That sock. It felt like a message from the children I never got to hold. Like a voice whispering, "We were real, Mama." And they knew. I dropped it, rushed back into my apartment, slammed the door, and locked it. I fell to the floor, holding my head and rocking myself. My breathing was loud, wild. I wanted to scream. But my voice had left me. That sock. It was more than a threat. It was a warning. They had been watching me. They knew what I was doing. I called Clara immediately. My voice cracked as I spoke. Clara, they left a baby sock. And a note. It said I'll end up like Daniel. She gasped. Oh my God. Evelyn, don't leave your house. I'm coming now. Less than an hour later, she arrived with a retired detective, Mr. Leonard. He had been working with her NGO on a few human trafficking cases. He was tall, dark-skinned, and calm. He looked me in the eye and said, "We'll protect you. But we need you to be strong, Evelyn. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better." I was already broken. What more could they take? Leonard asked if I remembered anything else about that night at the party Gregory took me to years ago, the one with the men in suits. I tried. I really did. My mind was foggy. But then I remembered a man with a scar across his face. He didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. I never knew his name, but Gregory called him Chairman. Clara's eyes lit up. That same nickname came up in another trafficking case. We thought it was just a ghost name. Leonard nodded. He's real. And dangerous. Now the mission wasn't just about Gregory anymore, it was about finding the entire network. The party. The doctors. The chairman. But before we could move further, we had to find Daniel. Dead or alive. We split up. Clara went to check Daniel's workplace again while Leonard took me with him to Daniel's last known contact, the taxi driver who dropped him off the night he disappeared. The driver was a thin man with deep eye bags. "I drop am for one estate in Lekki," he said. "He say him day meet someone but no talk who. After dat night, I no see him again." We drove to the estate. The gate man there said he didn't remember seeing anyone matching Daniel's photo. "Too many people come and go here, madam," he said. Frustrated, we drove back into the city. My head was spinning. Everything felt too big. Too dangerous. But something told me Daniel had found something powerful. And someone didn't want him to share it. That night, I stayed at Clara's place. I couldn't go home again. I didn't feel safe. I barely ate. Barely slept. I kept staring at the pink sock. Even though Clara had thrown it away, I could still feel it. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a scream. I had dreamed of 100 tiny hands dragging me into a dark tunnel, calling, "Mama! Mama! Why didn't you save us?" Clara ran to my room and held me. "Evelyn, you have to let go of the guilt. You were a victim. You didn't choose this." But the truth is, some days I did feel like I chose it. I stayed. I kept silent. I didn't fight soon enough. "I want to find them," I whispered. "All of them. Gregory, Chairman, the doctors, the guests at those parties. Even if I die doing it." And the very next day we got our first breakthrough. Leonard received an anonymous tip, sent to Clara's NGO email. It had one line of text and an attachment. The message read, "Gregory's driver knows everything. Check his warehouse in Aja. Go at night." The attachment was a blurry photo of a man I recognized instantly. Gregory's personal driver, Thomas. Thomas had worked with Gregory for over 15 years. He was quiet, loyal, always nodding, never speaking. I never thought he noticed me. But what if he did? Leonard warned us. This could be a trap. But it could also be our only shot. We decided to take the risk. That night, Leonard, Clara, and I drove to the address mentioned. It was a rusty warehouse, half covered in weeds. The gates creaked when we pushed them open. The place smelled of dust and oil. We walked in cautiously, flashlights in hand. At first, it looked empty, abandoned. Then we saw movement. A shadow. We froze. "Thomas!" Leonard called out. The shadow stepped forward. It was him. His clothes were dirty, his eyes sunken. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, he gasped. "Madam Evelyn? You came?" "Yes," I said, stepping forward. "Why are you hiding?" Thomas lowered his head. "They're looking for me. I was supposed to disappear like Daniel. But I escaped." My heart skipped. "You know what happened to Daniel?" Thomas looked around nervously, then nodded. "Ido. But I need to show you something." He led us to a back room behind stacks of dusty boxes. He opened a rusty locker and pulled out a laptop and a black notebook. "This," he said, placing them down, is everything. Names, videos, bank transfers, records of parties, clinics, even police officers on their payroll. We were stunned. Clara's hand shook as she opened the notebook. I used to drive Gregory to all his meetings. I saw everything, and I started recording. First I was scared, but after what they did to some of those girls, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. He paused. His eyes welled up with tears. I have a daughter, madam. Same age you were when you started working for him. I couldn't watch this evil continue. I touched his hand gently. Thank you, Thomas. You have no idea what this means. But just as we were about to pack the laptop and leave, we heard it, the sound of tires screeching outside. Headlights. Doors slamming. Men shouting. They found us, Leonard yelled. Thomas grabbed the laptop and notebook. There's a back door. Follow me. We ran. My legs felt like they would give out, but I didn't stop. Behind us, I heard the warehouse door crash open. Find them, someone shouted. We ran through the bush behind the warehouse, stumbled over rocks and thorns. I tore my dress. Clara fell but got back up. When we finally reached the road, Leonard flagged down a passing Kiki tricycle. We jumped in. Go! Go! He screamed at the driver. We didn't stop until we reached Clara's office. We locked the doors and breathed. Thomas collapsed on a chair, panting. I think I just gave you enough to destroy Gregory, he said. But Leonard's face was pale. Not just Gregory, he said slowly, flipping through the notebook. He turned the page and showed us a list of names, politicians, police officers, business tycoons, and at the top, chairman real name, Chief Henry Okafor. My eyes widened. That name was all over the news. A respected philanthropist, a family man, a man who recently received a national honor. My hands went cold. We're not just fighting a rapist anymore, Leonard said. We're fighting a system. I stared at the list. My whole body trembled, because the next name under chairman's was one I knew too well. Dr. Felix, the man who told me I may never have children again. I clenched my fists. I knew what I had to do next. I had to face Dr. Felix. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept going back to that list. That notebook full of secrets. Names of men I had seen smiling on television, giving speeches about protecting the girl child. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear my skin off. But mostly I wanted answers from the doctor who helped destroy my womb. Dr. Felix. I remembered every visit to his clinic like a wound that refused to heal. The cold metal bed. The smell of chemicals. The way he avoided looking into my eyes as he pressed the syringe into my arm. And the worst part? He never said a word. Never asked how I was. Never gave me painkillers. Just did the job like I was some object. Like I wasn't even human. Now his name was on that list. And Thomas said he might still be working with them. I had to know the truth. Leonard warned me. We have to be smart. If Felix senses anything, he might disappear or alert the others. But I shook my head. I want to see him. Face to face. As a patient. One last time. They didn't like the idea. Clara cried. Evelyn, it's too risky. These people don't play fair. I've been his victim for 20 years, I whispered. But not anymore. This time, I'll be the one asking questions. It took us a few days to plan it. Leonard got me a small voice recorder I could hide in my bra. Clara stayed in a car outside with her phone ready to record video from a distance. Thomas helped forge a fake name and old medical records, just in case they asked. I wore a long gown and tied a scarf over my head. My hands were sweating as I approached the small gray building. The sign outside still read Hope Life Women's Clinic. The irony. The receptionist didn't recognize me. I gave the fake name, and she told me to wait. The chair felt harder than I remembered. My legs bounced uncontrollably. And then I heard it. Next. That voice. That cold, calm voice. I stood up slowly and walked in. There he was, Dr. Felix. Still the same dull eyes, still the same stiff hands. His hair had grayed a little, but otherwise he looked unchanged. He glanced at the paper and then looked at me. His eyes narrowed. Have we met before? He asked. I smiled faintly. I don't think so, doctor. But maybe I just have one of those faces. He shrugged. What brings you in today? I sat down, keeping my voice steady. I've had multiple abortions in the past. My period is irregular. I think my womb is damaged. I want to know if I can ever be a mother. He froze for a second. How many abortions? I looked at him straight. Over 100. His face changed. Just slightly. His eyes dropped to my file again. Name again? I repeated the fake name. He nodded. Any known complications? Pain. Bleeding. Nightmares. He glanced at me again. I leaned forward. Do you remember me now, doctor? His face turned white. Excuse me. I said, do you remember me? You did over 20 abortions on me. Sometimes 5 in 1 year. Sent by a man named Gregory. He stood up quickly, pushing his chair back. I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? Who sent you? My hands trembled, but I didn't stop. You don't remember Evelyn? You never even looked me in the eye when you tore life out of my body again and again. He backed away toward the door. You need to leave. Right now. I stood too. I'm not leaving until you answer me. Why did you do it? Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you say something when you knew I was being forced? He grabbed his phone. I'm calling security. But I could see something in his eyes, fear. Go ahead, I said. But you and I both know you're guilty. And I have proof. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed photo, one Thomas gave me, of Felix receiving an envelope from Gregory outside the same clinic. Blood money. He stared at the photo for a long time, then slowly sat down. I didn't have a choice, he whispered. I swallowed. What do you mean? They own everything, he said. The police, the government, the media. I tried to stop once. Gregory warned me. The next day, my wife had a miscarriage. The car brakes failed. I knew what it meant. So I kept quiet. He buried his face in his hands. I hate myself, he muttered. But I couldn't save you. I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. Just cold emptiness. You could have tried, I said quietly. I was just a girl. And you let him break me. He nodded slowly like a man defeated. I can help you now, he said. I still have files. Names. Photos. Records of every girl they brought in. Some of them didn't survive the procedure. Their families were told they ran away. My stomach turned. You kept that information? He nodded. I hid them. Just in case. I'll give them to you. But you have to protect me. Leonard and Clara burst in right then, having heard everything through the recorder. Felix jumped, but Clara held up her hand. We're not here to hurt you, but we need those files. Felix sighed. They're hidden. But I'll get them. He handed us a key and an address. Locker number 8, he whispered. Before we could leave, he looked at me and said, I'm sorry. I know it means nothing now, but I am. I walked out without replying. Sorry wouldn't give me back my babies. It wouldn't give me back the years of pain. But maybe his guilt would be the first stone to bring the whole house down. We drove to the location immediately, a rented storage unit near the edge of town. Inside Locker 8 were 2 metal boxes covered in dust. Inside, hundreds of documents, memory cards, and even videotapes. We carried everything back to the NGO office. For hours we went through the files. Names, dates, clinic records, even ID photos. Some of the girls were as young as 14. Most of them had no families listed. They were ghosts. But then Clara found something that made her scream. A document marked property transfer. Evelyn Lawson. My heart stopped. It was a legal document. Faked. Signed by Gregory and 2 witnesses. It claimed I had willingly signed myself over to Gregory as a permanent assistant, with benefits exchange. I was listed like property. Like a slave. Clara's voice shook. He legally owned you on paper. And the witnesses, look at their names. I looked. Chief Henry Okafor. Commissioner Evans Madu. The chairman and a police commissioner. The entire system was behind it. I felt sick. My stomach burned. My head spun. All this time I thought I was just trapped by one man. But no. I had been sold. Like an object. And suddenly I remembered something else. A memory I had forgotten for years. A day Gregory handed me a pen and said, "Just sign this. It's for your salary raise." And I signed. Without reading. I signed myself away. Tears poured down my face as I whispered, "He tricked me. I signed my own slavery." Clara hugged me. "Not anymore. We have proof now. All of it." Leonard was already dialing someone. "This has to go higher. We need protection. We need media. International help. They won't survive this if we act fast." But just as we were about to celebrate our first real breakthrough, Thomas, who had been standing near the window, suddenly turned. "Get down," he yelled. Glass shattered. Gunshots. Screams filled the room. Clara pulled me to the floor. Leonard grabbed a chair to block the door. Papers flew everywhere. "They found us again," Clara shouted. And right before we could escape through the back, Thomas collapsed, blood pooling around his chest. "No," I screamed, crawling to him. He looked at me with weak eyes and whispered, "Don't stop, Evelyn. Please don't let them win." Then his eyes closed. Forever. I held Thomas in my arms as his warm blood soaked through my clothes. His breathing had stopped. His eyes, those kind, regretful eyes, were wide open, staring into nothing. My hands trembled. I kept whispering, "Please don't go. Please." But his chest never rose again. He was gone. The man who risked his life to help me. The man who carried years of guilt just to do one good thing before he died. They silenced him. Just like they did to Daniel. Clara was screaming for help. Leonard was already calling emergency responders, but I knew it was too late. The bullets weren't meant to scare us this time. They were meant to kill. And they had succeeded again. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even feel. I was numb. I sat there covered in blood, holding Thomas like he was my own brother, my own son. I had lost too much. Too many people. Too many babies. Too many chances to live a normal life. But one thing was certain in that moment, I could not stop. Not now. Not when they were killing the people trying to help me. That same night, Clara's NGO office was evacuated. The building was no longer safe. The attackers had escaped and the police, corrupt as always, claimed there were no security cameras in the area. Lies. They didn't even try. We moved everything to a safe house outside the city, protected by a few retired soldiers working with Leonard. There we regrouped. The files. The tapes. The notebook. Everything had to be duplicated and stored in cloud drives, hard drives, and flash disks. We couldn't risk losing this evidence. Clara was visibly shaken. She hadn't stopped shaking since the shooting. "I can't believe they did this," she whispered as we packed the files. "They'll do more," Leonard said. "The closer we get, the more dangerous it gets." I stood silently, wrapping Thomas's blood-stained jacket into a bag. We finish what he started. No matter what. But something was haunting me, Chief Henry Okafor. Chairman. He was the key to everything. The name at the top. The man Gregory worked for. The man who was probably behind Thomas's death. We needed to reach him. Leonard came up with a plan. "Chairman has a big charity event coming up in Abuja," he said. "All the high-profile names will be there. We get someone inside. Get close to him. Confront him. Get a confession if we can." Clara shook her head. "That's too dangerous. We've already lost 2 people. We can't lose Evelyn." But I was done being protected. "I'll go," I said. "He knows me. He won't expect me to be the one walking through those doors. I'll wear a mask if I have to. I'll play whatever role it takes. But I have to look him in the eye." It took 3 days to prepare. We created a new identity for me, Mrs. Elaine Thomas, investor and women's rights donor. I had a gown stitched, a wig made, and fake ID cards printed. Leonard arranged for a small media team to pose as event journalists. Clara would stay outside, tracking everything by phone. The night of the event arrived. The hall was beautiful. Marble floors. Golden chandeliers. Waiters in white gloves. Cameras flashing. Politicians shaking hands and smiling. But beneath that beauty, I saw the darkness. I could feel it crawling under their skin like worms. Then he walked in. Chief Henry Okafor. The man they called chairman. Tall. broad-shouldered, bald head, white native attire with gold embroidery. His smile lit up the room like a pastor about to preach. People rushed to greet him. His security detail flanked him on all sides. I stood at the far end of the hall, heart pounding, palms sweating. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times. But nothing could prepare me for seeing the man who had stolen my life. Leonard's voice came through the earpiece. Don't panic. Approach slowly. Let's get him alone. I picked up a wine glass and walked slowly toward him, pretending to blend with the crowd. I smiled, nodded politely, waited. Then, at the right moment, I stepped beside him. Chief Henry, I said, my voice calm but cold.
I'm Elaine Thomas.
I've heard so much about your charity work. He turned. Our eyes locked. His smile froze. He stared at me for a second too long. Then he forced a smile. Ah yes. A pleasure to meet you, Madame Elaine. We shook hands. His fingers gripped too tightly, like he knew. But he didn't say anything. I continued. I would love to discuss a private donation, perhaps somewhere quiet. He hesitated, looked at his men, then nodded slowly. Of course. Follow me. He led me to a side lounge, empty, quiet. 2 guards stood outside the door. We sat. His smile faded. You're not Elaine. And you're not a philanthropist, I replied, pulling out a flash drive. But this says everything about who you really are. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're doing, girl. I know you signed a document that turned me into property. I know you're behind Daniel's disappearance and Thomas's death. You don't have proof, he said coolly. I have documents, videos, witnesses. And if anything happens to me, everything goes public. He leaned back. You think the world cares? You think this country will fight for you? They'll say you wanted it, that you were paid, that you were greedy. I was 22, fresh out of school. Your boys ripped the future out of my womb and threw it into clinics. I lost 100 babies, and you called it business. He said nothing, so I leaned closer. I'm not afraid of you anymore. He chuckled darkly. You should be. I stood. You'll see me again, Chief. But next time, it will be in court. As I turned to leave, he said something I'll never forget. You're not the first girl I've broken, Evelyn. And you won't be the last. I turned back. My hands shook. My heart raged. You're wrong, I said. I'll be the last one you ever break. Outside, Leonard pulled me into a car, and we sped off. Clara hugged me so tightly when I returned that I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The next day, we released the first set of evidence, anonymously, through trusted international reporters. Videos, documents, names. It exploded online. #JusticeForEvelyn began to trend. Women began to speak. Survivors came forward, some from years ago, some from just months back. And then came the shock. One of the victims turned out to be a senator's daughter, and she had a tape, a full recording of chairman at one of those parties, drugging a girl, laughing, unaware the girl was wearing a hidden camera. That tape changed everything. The president ordered an investigation. Interpol got involved. Gregory went into hiding. Dr. Felix was taken into protection. But nothing prepared me for the moment I turned on the news and saw it. Chief Henry Okafor arrested. Faces charges of human trafficking, rape and conspiracy. I dropped to my knees. Clara screamed. Leonard smiled for the first time in weeks. I cried. For Thomas. For Daniel. For the babies I lost. For the girl I once was. But I didn't know that just as one door closed, another was about to open. Because the next morning I received a call. From a voice I hadn't heard in over 20 years. A woman whispered, Evelyn, my name is Ruth. I'm your daughter. And I'm alive. I cried for days after that. My world had crumbled. 20 years of my life and he tossed me aside like trash. No pension, no benefits, nothing. Just pain. My womb gone, my strength stolen, and my dignity crushed. But something changed in me. One morning I woke up and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my lips dry, but there was something burning in my chest, a quiet fire. I whispered to myself, he destroyed your body but not your spirit. That day, I packed what little strength I had left and went to a lawyer's office. I had no money, just tears and truth. I begged them to help me. At first they turned me away. But as I was about to leave, one of the junior lawyers, a young woman named Janet, called me back. "Mama," she said, "tell me everything." And I did. From the first time Robert forced himself on me to the last time I cleaned his office after he made me abort again. I told her about the pain, the scars, the silence. Janet's hands trembled as she took notes. I could see fire in her eyes. "We'll take him down," she said softly. I didn't believe it at first. Robert had money. He had power. He had friends in high places. And I had nothing but truth and a broken womb. But Janet told me something that gave me strength. Truth doesn't need money. It only needs a voice. So I signed the papers. We filed a case. First, nobody believed me. The newspapers ignored it. Robert even laughed when he heard. "Who's going to believe an old woman with no children?" he said. But then, something unexpected happened. One of his ex-secretaries heard about my story on a small local blog. She came forward. Her name was Linda. She had also been abused. She had also been forced to abort. She had also been sacked. Then another woman came. And another. Before long, there were 6 of us. 6 broken women with one story, Robert. Janet cried when she read all the testimonies. "You started something big, Mama," she whispered. "You're going to save lives." The media caught wind of it. Soon reporters were knocking on my door. Some came with cameras, some with microphones. I was afraid, but I spoke. I told my story, not with shame but with courage. And that was when the threats began. Robert sent men to my home. One night, I heard footsteps outside my window. The next morning, I found a dead bird on my doorstep. Another day, I got a letter that said, "Drop the case or drop dead." I was terrified. I called Janet. She came with the police. For my safety, they moved me into a shelter for abused women. It was a small place, but warm. And for the first time in years, I slept without fear. Then something worse happened. One of the women, Linda, was attacked. She was walking home from work when a car pulled up beside her. 3 men jumped out. They beat her until she passed out. She survived, but barely. It was clear Robert was fighting back. We knew then that this wasn't just a legal case. It was war. But we didn't stop. In fact, that attack made us louder. We stood before the court, side by side. We held hands. When I testified, the courtroom was silent. I told the judge how I had been used, discarded, and left barren. I lifted my blouse to show the scars on my belly. The room gasped. Robert smirked the entire time. Then it was Linda's turn. And then Rachel's. And each of us bared our wounds to the world. I looked him in the eyes, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. But what came next shocked even me. The judge did something no one expected. He adjourned the case indefinitely. I was confused. Janet was furious. Then we got word. Robert had bribed the judge. I collapsed on the courtroom steps. I thought it was over. But it wasn't. Because someone else was watching. Someone powerful. And the message they sent us the next day would change everything. The very next morning, while I was still in bed at the shelter, I heard a knock on the door. One of the volunteers peeked in and whispered, "Mama, there's someone here to see you." I got up slowly, expecting maybe Janet or one of the other women. But when I reached the small waiting area, I froze. Standing there, tall in an ash-colored suit and glasses, was a man I had only ever seen on television. He was a well-known human rights activist and one of the most respected legal minds in the country, Mr. Anthony Grant. He had handled major abuse cases before, but I never imagined he would come for someone like me. I almost thought I was dreaming. He stepped forward and held out his hand gently. "Madam Elizabeth," he asked, "I've read your story, and I'm here to help you finish what you started." Tears filled my eyes. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time in 20 years, someone important believed me. Without doubt, without mockery. Janet came rushing in soon after. She had no idea either. Apparently, Mr. Grant had read our court testimonies online and was so disturbed, he dropped everything he was doing and flew in from the capital. That very same day, he took over the case. Within a week, he filed a petition to reopen the trial, this time with federal oversight, removing it from the corrupt local judge's hands. Things began moving fast. More news stations picked up the story. Newspapers plastered Robert's photo everywhere, and the headline read, "CEO accused of forcing multiple abortions, now faces national trial." Robert panicked. He hired the best lawyers money could buy. He denied everything. Called us liars, prostitutes, greedy old women. But the tide had already turned. One of his former male employees came forward and said he'd once overheard Robert threatening a secretary if she ever talked. Another man testified that he had helped dispose of medical waste from the office without ever understanding what it was. Even the doctor who had performed the illegal abortions on me, yes, that monster, was arrested. Faced with prison, he confessed everything. Said Robert paid him under the table. Said I wasn't the only one. I sat in the courtroom on the first day of the new trial, holding Janet's hand with one hand and gripping my mother's old rosary with the other. I had never felt more scared or more alive. Mr. Grant stood before the judge and gave an opening speech so powerful that even the reporters were wiping their eyes. He spoke of how power is used to silence women, how pain is hidden behind office desks, how wounds that don't bleed are the easiest to ignore. He ended with my name. He said, "This is not just about Elizabeth. This is about justice for every woman who was told her voice didn't matter." Then it was my turn again. I took the stand and looked straight at Robert. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Maybe for the first time, he saw me not as a victim, but as a threat. I spoke with a voice that didn't shake anymore. I told them everything again, but this time, the courtroom wasn't silent out of disbelief. It was quiet because the truth was too loud to deny. But Robert wasn't done fighting. A few days into the trial, a car followed Janet home from court. Another day, someone broke into the shelter and stole my documents. We knew it was his men. They wanted to break us. Then came the bribe. Yes. Robert's men approached me with a bag full of money. They said if I dropped the case, they would give me a house, a car, and enough cash to live the rest of my life in peace. I looked at that bag, then looked at them and said, "You've already taken my womb. You won't take my soul too." I threw the bag on the floor. They left in silence. The next morning, my face was on every morning news station. Elizabeth Dean, 62, rejects bribe from abuser. The people began to rally behind me. I got letters from other women across the country who had also been forced to abort by powerful men. Some even started calling me Mama Courage. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. The judge issued a subpoena for Robert's personal medical assistant. She didn't want to testify at first, but when she finally took the stand, her words were a thunderbolt. She said that Robert had recorded many of the forced abortions for his own sick amusement, and the police had found the videos. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled as the court clerk read out the names of the video files. My name was on 5 of them. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I stayed. I stood strong. Because this wasn't just for me anymore, it was for all of us. The judge adjourned the court again. He needed time to process the new evidence. But I knew deep down we had finally cornered the devil. The courtroom was buzzing. Reporters chased us outside. People cheered and clapped for me. Some cried. A young girl hugged me and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. You're fighting for all of us." But that very night, as I sat on my bed with the rosary still clutched in my hand, I received a phone call that made my heart drop. Robert had disappeared. Vanished. Fled the country. And what happened after that was even worse than everything I had faced before. When I heard that Robert had fled the country, I felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. How? How could someone with so many charges, someone who had destroyed so many lives, just vanish? Mr. Grant was furious. He stormed into the courthouse the next morning and demanded answers. The judge was embarrassed. The police shrugged. No one wanted to admit the truth. Robert had been warned. Someone powerful, someone close to the system had tipped him off. They had given him time to run. Maybe it was money. Maybe it was influence. But it worked. And the devil had escaped judgment again. I sat there in silence while the whole courtroom buzzed with whispers and shock. Janet squeezed my hand tightly and said, "Mama, we're not giving up. Not now." Mr. Grant promised us that they were already working with Interpol. He can run, he said, but he can't hide forever. But days turned into weeks, and still no news. Then, something unexpected happened. More victims began coming forward, many more. Women who had worked with Robert years ago. Women who had been silenced. Some had tried to commit suicide. Some had been living with guilt, shame, and broken marriages. But now, with my story everywhere, they found courage. One of them, an older woman named Clara, told a journalist, "If Mama Elizabeth can fight, then I will too." Soon a movement began. People started wearing black ribbons for workplace abuse survivors. Social media exploded with the hashtag Justice for Elizabeth. A march was organized in the Capitol. Thousands of women, old, young, professionals, market women, even students, marched through the streets carrying signs that read, "My womb is not your playground. 20 years of silence ends today." Mama Courage lit the match. Even the president's wife made a statement. She said, "We can no longer allow women to suffer in silence. What happened to Elizabeth Dean must never happen again." I watched all this from my little shelter bed. Still shaking, still tired, but also overwhelmed. Me? An old secretary from a dusty office in Port Harcourt? Now the face of a movement. I never asked for this. But God had other plans. One day, as I sat reading the newspaper, a man in plain clothes walked into the shelter. He introduced himself as Agent Morales from Interpol. He said just 4 words. "We've found him, ma'am." I stood up, heart pounding. Robert had been caught in Dubai, trying to open a new business under a fake name. But his fingerprints had given him away. He was now in custody, awaiting extradition. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I dropped the newspaper. Janet screamed and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. We had done it. But the fight wasn't over. The government decided to make Robert's case a national trial, broadcast live on television. They said they wanted it to set an example for future generations. The courtroom was bigger this time, filled with lawyers, activists, journalists, and survivors. And on the first day, when Robert was brought in under heavy security, he looked like a ghost. No more fine suits. No more arrogance. Just a scared, pale man hiding behind sunglasses. He refused to speak. But it didn't matter. Because this time the evidence spoke for him. Videos. Testimonies. Medical reports. Doctor confessions. Bank records showing payments to cover illegal procedures. And me, I spoke last. I stood in front of the entire nation and said, "Robert Harrison took everything from me, my innocence, my womb, my years. But he didn't take my voice. Not anymore. I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." The room was silent. Even the judge took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. When the verdict came, it shook the country. Guilty. Life imprisonment without parole. The courtroom erupted. Some people clapped. Some wept. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, God. You saw me." But just when I thought the story had ended, I received a call from a publisher. They wanted to turn my story into a book. And not long after that, a school invited me to speak to young girls. Then a women's rights organization offered me a lifetime award. I had gone from victim to voice. And just when I thought my heart had healed, I got a message that made me cry all over again. It was from a young lady, just 19. She wrote, "Dear Grandma Elizabeth, I was about to abort a pregnancy I didn't want. But then I read your story. I realized I was being pressured by someone like Robert. You saved me. Thank you for being brave." I dropped the phone and sobbed like a child. Because now I knew. My pain had birthed purpose. But there was still one thing left to face. Something I had buried deep in my soul for 20 years. The graveyard. And when I finally went back there, what I saw will break your heart. I hadn't been to that graveyard in 20 years. Not since I buried the first child I lost to Robert's evil. Back then there was no name, no ceremony. Just a small wooden cross and my tears soaking into the earth. But today I was not alone. Janet held my hand. Mr. Grant stood beside me, silent but strong. A small crowd of women, survivors like me, stood behind us in black and white, holding flowers, some crying quietly. A journalist tried to approach, but I waved him away. This was personal. We walked through the overgrown paths. The graveyard was quiet, except for the distant chirping of birds and the rustling of dry leaves under our feet. I stopped in front of a crooked, weathered plank with no writing. My legs trembled. I sank to my knees and whispered,
I'm sorry.
Mama is so sorry. They never let me name you. But I always called you Hope. Janet knelt beside me and placed a rose on the soil. I would have been their big sister, she said softly, and I would have loved them. Tears blurred my vision. I reached into my bag and pulled out a little white stone, carefully engraved with 5 tiny hearts. I placed it at the foot of the grave. 1 heart for each child I had lost. 1 prayer for each soul that never got a chance to live. I sat there for a long time, praying, mourning, forgiving myself, because I needed to say goodbye. But just as I stood up to leave, a little girl in a yellow dress ran toward us from the back of the crowd. Her mother chased after her, laughing gently. The child stopped in front of me, looked up and said, Grandma, are these your babies? I smiled through my tears and nodded. Yes, baby. They were. But now they are angels. The little girl picked a dandelion and placed it beside the stone. Then they're with God, she said, then skipped away. I collapsed into Janet's arms. That moment healed something I didn't even know was still broken. From that day on, I made it my mission to visit the graveyard every year, not just for me, but for every woman who had suffered in silence. The government officially passed the Elizabeth Dean Law that year. A law protecting women from abuse in the workplace and holding organizations accountable. My book, Wounds and Wisdom, became a bestseller across Africa. It was translated into 11 languages. I was invited to speak at the United Nations in New York, where I stood in front of world leaders and said, It took me 20 years to speak. Let's make sure no woman has to wait 20 seconds. Now I'm 82 years old. I sit on this porch with my hot cocoa and my soft blanket, watching my grandchildren play. The sun is setting, and birds are flying across the pink sky. Janet is married now, with twins. She named one of them Hope. Sometimes people ask me how I survived all those years. The answer is simple. I survived because I knew one day, my pain would help someone else heal. But before I close this chapter for good, there's one last thing I must tell you. Robert died in prison last year. Alone. Forgotten. No visitors. No funeral. Just a name on a sheet of paper and a number on a toe tag. That same week, the shelter where I stayed after escaping him was renamed Mama Elizabeth's House of Healing. And as I stood before the ribbon to cut it open, surrounded by girls rescued from pain and danger, I whispered to the wind, This is the real justice.